Good evening, little ones. Here are 3 fairy tales to help you drift off to sleep and have lovely, sweet slumbers. The first story is Little Red Riding Hood. There once was a little girl who lived with her father and mother in a cottage on the edge of a great forest. The girl's father was a woodcutter, and every day he went out to fell trees in the forest. Just inside the forest there was another cottage, and here lived the little girl's grandmother, who one day made her granddaughter a lovely riding hood and cloak in the brightest scarlet cloth. The little girl wore her lovely bright cloak and hood whenever she went out, and everybody called her Red Riding Hood. One morning, Red Riding Hood's mother said, "Your grandmother is not very well today, so I have made her a sweet custard and some fresh butter. You may take them to her as a gift, but remember to go straight there and straight back again." Little Red Riding Hood put on her gay cloak and hood and took the basket from her mother, but she had not gone far down the road towards the forest and her grandmother's cottage when she came upon a great wolf sitting across her path. "Hello, Red Riding Hood," grinned the wolf. "Where are you off to this fine morning?" "I am going to see my grandmother who is not very well," replied the little girl. "I have some custard and fresh butter for her." The wolf smacked his lips, but he was not thinking of the custard and butter. He was thinking that he might be able to make a meal out of the grandmother and the girl herself. "Live far away, Red Riding Hood?" asked the wolf. "Her cottage is just down the forest path," replied the little girl. "Then I will go and see her as well," said the wolf. "That is very good of you," said Red Riding Hood. "I am going to gather some flowers for her, and then we can walk along together." But the wicked wolf had other plans. "Let us see who will get to your granny's cottage first," he said. "I will take this path, and you can follow that one." Now the wolf had pointed out the longer way to Red Riding Hood. She forgot her mother's words and went off down the path the wolf had shown her. She stopped on the way to gather flowers, and she chased the butterflies, while the wolf bounded along in his shorter path as quickly as he could. When the wolf came to the cottage, he knocked on the door. "Who is there?" called the old lady from her bed. "It is Red Riding Hood," replied the wolf, trying to sound like a little girl. "Pull the bobbin and the latch will go up," cried the grandmother. The wolf did as he was told and then bounded into the room. When the old lady saw the great wolf with his long red tongue and sharp white teeth, she jumped from her bed and ran out of the back door so quickly that even the wolf couldn't catch her. He did not chase her, but instead he waited for Red Riding Hood. He dressed himself up in one of the old lady's night dresses and put on one of her nightcaps, then slipped into the bed in her place. When Red Riding Hood at last reached the cottage, she knocked at the door. "Who is there?" asked the wolf. "Poor Granny does sound hoarse," thought the little girl. "It is Red Riding Hood," she cried aloud. "I have brought you a custard and some fresh butter." "Pull the bobbin and the latch will go up," called the wolf, trying to sound like Granny. Red Riding Hood went into the cottage, and after taking off her hood and cloak, she sat on her grandmother's bed, as well as he could under the bed covers. But Red Riding Hood noticed his long arms. "Grandmamma, what great arms you have!" she cried with surprise. "All the better to hug you with, my dear," said the wolf. "Grandmamma, what great legs you have!" said Red Riding Hood next. "All the better to run with, my dear," cried the wolf. "Grandmamma, what great ears you have!" said Red Riding Hood. "All the better to hear you with, my dear," cried the wolf. "Grandmamma, what great eyes you have!" said Red Riding Hood, peering at the wolf. "All the better to see you with, my dear," grinned the wolf. "Grandmamma, what great teeth you have!" exclaimed Little Red Riding Hood. "All the better to eat you with, my dear," snarled the wolf. Red Riding Hood gave a loud, frightened scream as she jumped off the bed. The wolf leapt out of the bed, but before he could catch the little girl, the door opened, and in hurried her woodcutter father with his sharp hatchet. The wicked wolf tore past the woodcutter, out through the doorway, and ran for his life. Red Riding Hood's grandmother crept back into her cottage when she saw the wolf go, and after hugging the little girl, she got back into her bed. She thankfully ate the sweet egg custard and the fresh butter that her granddaughter had brought her, and felt very much better. Little Red Riding Hood soon forgot how frightened she had been when she saw her grandmother's smiling face, and walked happily through the forest by her father's side, back to their own cottage. Our next story tonight is called Hop O' My Thumb. Once upon a time there were 7 little boys, all brothers. Hop O' My Thumb was the youngest and the smallest of them all. One day they followed their father, a woodman, into the woods where they had never been before. The family were very poor, and their father worked from sunrise to sunset for money to buy food and clothes for them all. The boys were all too young to work, but they thought they might gather some sticks to sell in the village for firewood. As they ran deeper into the woods, some of the boys began to cry, but Hop O' My Thumb told them not to be frightened. "But we are lost," sobbed one of the boys. "Come on," cried Tom, the eldest. "We must find father." "Let us gather some sticks," said Hop O' My Thumb. "Then we can go home." "We don't know how to get home," said Teddy, the next youngest. "I do," said Hop O' My Thumb, who had filled his pockets with pebbles from the banks of a little stream earlier in the day, and had been dropping them behind him as he followed his brothers into the wood. "Oh, look! There's a cottage behind the trees," cried Tom. "I'll ask them if they can give us a drink of water," said Hop O' My Thumb. The old lady who opened the door said, "Go away, little boy. A fierce giant lives here, and he does not like children. He is counting his gold under a tree." At that moment the giant came running towards them, wearing his 7-league boots. The boys took to their heels and fled, while the giant came striding after them. But Hop O' My Thumb still went scattering pebbles as he led his brothers in and out of the trees, trying to tire the giant out. For the boys were young and thin, and the giant was old and fat. "Oh, goodness, what shall I do if he catches us?" cried Tim, the next to the eldest. "He won't catch us," promised brave little Hop O' My Thumb. "Listen, I can't hear him crashing through the bushes now, can you?" And all his brothers shook their heads. "Well," said Hop O' My Thumb, sitting on a log, "I think we have been very lucky indeed." His 6 brothers were so tired after their running up and down and in and out of the woodland trees to try to escape the giant that they decided to lie down and have a little nap before following Hop O' My Thumb's pebbles out of the wood. "It was a wonderful idea," said Tom. "Now we can soon get home again." While his brothers slept, Hop O' My Thumb kept trying to think of some way of getting money for their mother and father. In a little while his brother wakened up, and they all washed their hands and faces in a woodland pool. Then on their way home, Hop O' My Thumb had a great idea. they came upon the giant fast asleep and snoring. Very carefully he pulled off one of the giant's 7-league boots, and he began to put his foot in it. To the brothers' surprise, the 7-league boot grew as tiny as Hop-o'-my-Thumb's own foot and fitted him perfectly. And as soon as he began to put on the other 7-league boot, that also began to grow smaller. "They're magic boots," whispered Hop-o'-my-Thumb. "Now I'm going back to the cottage in the wood, and you must come after me as fast as you can, but be very quiet in case the horrid old giant wakes up." And smiling at his brothers, he set off as fast as the wind in the 7-league boots. The brothers ran after Hop-o'-my-Thumb as quietly as they could, and the giant, who had eaten a huge dinner that day, and as he was fat and lazy, did not awake. He loved sleeping almost as much as he loved his bag of gold. "I wonder what Hop-o'-my-Thumb is going to do," said Teddy, the next to youngest brother, as they ran through the wood, keeping Pebbles in sight so they would not lose their way. When Hop-o'-my-Thumb reached the giant's cottage, he told the housekeeper that the giant wanted his bag of gold at once, and that he had lent him his boots to get it quickly. She brought out the bag of gold, and Hop-o'-my-Thumb thanked her and staggered off with it to meet his brothers. Sitting down under a tree, Hop-o'-my-Thumb waited for them to arrive, and when they did, they could hardly believe their eyes. "You are clever, Hop-o'-my-Thumb," cried Tom. Then Hop-o'-my-Thumb picked up the bag of gold again. At home, the boy's mother and father were very, very upset. Their father had turned back to look for them in the wood, but he had somehow missed them. He had hunted for them for hours and then had to go back home, hoping to find them there safe and well. Their mother cried bitterly, and they had all told their neighbors, who said they would search the wood and fields for them when they had finished work. But it was growing dark before they were ready to start the search, and a mist was rising from the valley. "Oh, dear," sobbed the boy's mother, "we shall never see our dear little sons again." And then, oh joy! There came the sound of whistling outside the cottage and the tramping of feet. "It's our boys!" cried their mother, and she and their father ran out, their father carrying his lantern. "Oh, mother and father, we are rich!" cried Hop-o'-my-Thumb. "Now we can buy a food farm, and we can all help father with the work." Our last story tonight is Goldilocks and the 3 Bears. The story I'm sure you've heard before. In a pretty little house in a large forest a long time ago, there lived 3 bears: Father Bear, Mother Bear, and Baby Bear. One day the bears' breakfast porridge was so hot that they went for a walk while it cooled. At the same time, a little girl named Goldilocks went for a walk also, and she saw the house. Goldilocks peeped through the keyhole, but could not see very much, which made her all the more curious to see what was inside the tiny house, and she wondered who could live there. Goldilocks looked through the little window and could see that no one was at home, so she went to the door and tried the handle. To her great surprise, the door opened, so she walked into the house. The first room she entered was the bears' dining room. On the table she saw 3 bowls of porridge. One was very large, the second was a little smaller, and the third was a very tiny one. And as she felt hungry after her long walk, she thought she would try the porridge. First she tried the large bowl. The porridge was too hot. Then she tried the second. "This porridge has gone quite cold," she said. "I do not like it." There was only one tiny wee bowl left, and Goldilocks filled the little spoon with porridge and popped it in her mouth. The porridge in this bowl was so exactly right that Goldilocks ate up every scrap. After that she felt tired, and so she went to the great big chair to sit down on it. But it was too big, and the cushion was too hard for her. Next Goldilocks tried the middle-sized chair, but this one was so soft the little girl almost got lost in it. That left the tiny wee chair, and Goldilocks went and sat down on it. This was just the right size for Goldilocks, but alas, she was not the right size for it. Crack! One of the legs snapped off, and the little girl fell to the floor. I must have a rest, decided Goldilocks. I will go upstairs and see if the beds are any better than the chairs. She climbed up the stairs and went to the first bed, which was the great big one. Goldilocks tried to climb up on it, but it was so high up that she could not manage it. I will try the smaller bed, she said. Goldilocks went to the middle-sized bed. She got into this one quite easily, but it was far too soft and warm, and the little girl did not like it. I will try the tiny bed, sighed Goldilocks. She went to the tiny wee bed and climbed inside it. Then she pulled the pretty quilt over herself and curled up happily. This bed is just right, she murmured, and she went off to sleep. In the meantime, the bears had finished their walk, and they turned to go home and eat up their porridge. When they came to their little house, they found the door wide open. Father Bear went up to his great big bowl of porridge. Someone has been eating my porridge, he roared. Mother Bear went and looked at her middle-sized bowl. Someone has been eating my porridge, she growled. Baby Bear hurried to his tiny wee bowl. Someone has been tasting my porridge, he squealed, and they have eaten it all up. Then Father Bear saw that the cushion in his chair had been moved. Someone has been sitting on my chair, he roared. Mother Bear went to her middle-sized chair and saw that the seat was rumpled. Someone has been sitting on my chair, she growled. Baby Bear ran to his tiny wee chair. Someone has been sitting on my chair, he squeaked, and they have broken it. Father Bear was now very angry indeed. He picked up the little chair to see if he could mend it, but he quickly put it down again, saying, We must look all over the house in case anyone is still here. 3 bears peered into every corner of the dining room and the kitchen, but they could not find anyone, so they climbed up the stairs to the bedroom. Father Bear went to his great big bed and saw that the cover was crumpled. Someone has been sleeping in my bed, he roared. Mother Bear hurried to her middle-sized bed and saw the creased patchwork quilt. Someone has been sleeping in my bed, she growled. Baby Bear ran to his tiny wee bed and saw that there was something under his quilt. He looked closer, and there was Goldilocks fast asleep, cuddling one of his toys. Someone has been sleeping in my bed, he squealed, and she is still here. At the sound of Baby Bear's loud, squeaky voice, Goldilocks awakened with a start. She quickly sat up and stared at the tiny wee Baby Bear, and he stared back at her. Goldilocks, knowing she should not be there, jumped out of the bed and ran down the stairs and out of the little house as fast as she could. The 3 bears went after her, but she ran so quickly that they could not have caught her if they had tried. So they went back into their little house and closed the door. Mother Bear went upstairs to tidy the beds. Then she hurried downstairs to start making some fresh porridge, for they were all very hungry by now. Father Bear was busy too. He made a new leg for Baby Bear's chair so that it was good as new. Baby Bear, however, just stood looking out of the window. He was feeling rather sad, for he thought Goldilocks was beautiful, and he would have liked to have her for a playmate. Hope you enjoyed these 3 stories and they help you have sweet dreams. Good night.